Order. Welcome, everyone. First up, roll call. Robin, please.
Member Lewis.
Present.
Member Sparlingwood is absent. Member Rockwood.
Here.
Member Crow is absent. Member Phillips.
Here.
Member Morse.
Here.
Member Tutton.
Here.
And Member Paul.
All right. All right. Next, adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Adoption of the consent items.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion from the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Citizen comment. Any citizens in the room wanting to comment?
Ginger.
Seeing none, we'll move right along. State of the utility. This will be an interesting one with our new format.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chair and members, what we have, I believe you have a printout, and Robin's going to bring it up on the screen, is a draft idea of what the report could look like. We took a shot at both the formatting side of it, but also the content, and knowing that there is still work to be done on the content, we wanted input from the UAB so that we're not refining it down and then you all are looking for something very different. And so what I would like to do today is really kind of focus on two areas of the report because they're a little more mature than the other areas, and the two areas would be that and they're a little more mature, and I think energy supply specifically is an area that you all have expressed interest in the data. So Dino DeLeo, who is the energy supply officer, is here to kind of walk us through the elements of the energy supply. And so that we can kind of hear that input and information back. And then I am going to do the same thing with the water and wastewater section. The other sections we can still discuss and have input, but they're just not quite as mature on some of the things. And you know, I know when I reviewed it, there's things, hey, what about this? What about that? So you guys, but we can go through that and do that exercise as well if you all have input and to that. But I will just say broadly what we're trying to accomplish here is a couple big bullet points. One is to do this detailed overview of data and information on a quarterly basis, not on a monthly basis. Our reason for that is most of this information doesn't have these broad swings monthly, and so it kind of loses its value a little bit. If we look at it quarterly, I think it provides a better snapshot of where we are and a more valuable discussion. Our intent monthly would basically do, if you look at your packets, the first section is kind of highlights in each area, and it's mostly verbal, that we would do that every month. We would give highlights by area every month, but quarterly we would do this more detailed overall snapshot of a lot more of the data and information. So that's a big piece that we're looking at doing it quarterly. Another big piece would just be what we're trying to attempt to do here is have information that we utilize to run the business in here. So not like totally, some of it can be totally new and different, but not totally different reports and things, but things that are actually utilized to lead indicators, lag indicators that help us to operate the utility. So that was the attempt, and to also contextualize it. Like, so why is this important? Okay, you gave me a bunch of data. What does it compare to? Oh, permit capacities, or things like that. And so that was the other piece. And then the last piece I wanted to share is the last section of it is safety. So we went back and forth a lot on do we pull safety out and look at it holistically, or do we have safety in each of the operational areas independently? I got to tell you, internally, we had a split vote on that. So if you all wanted to see that different, I think we'd be up to that. But the way we're showing it now is all together at the end. It has breakouts by the areas, but it's kind of its own section at the end. So I think that's my little soliloquy about the operational report. If you all want to ask general questions, we can do that, or we can jump right to the energy supply section and kind of look through that more in detail with Mr. DeLeo.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you. You know, this is such a refreshing change to have, you guys attempting to change it in ways we've asked for in the past, and, trying to make this a very collaborative effort. Much appreciated. What do you guys think? Do you have any questions at this point? Do you want Dina to jump in?
It's fancy. Listen, it's fancy for sure, and I am just such a practical person. Every time I look at it, I just think about ink and toner and printing and wonder if we really need all of that. But you did a good job on providing and breaking out information. Hopefully that helps us on the dais to kind of save a little bit of time when we're up and people are not asking questions that's in front of. Not that they're not gonna ask anyway, but it would be helpful to have that in a little bit more detail. So it's nice. What I do like is having the flavor of having our employees highlighted throughout in community and pictures, and showing that we do have a human side regardless of what the community thinks out there about us and our rates. So, yeah, it's nice. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Chair, I will comment, we don't have to print these out, so it can be fancy and just be electronic. So we can talk about whether you would like us to provide this and print it out every time, or leave that up to you, or you look at, folks look at electronic to address that. I would say we're trying to make it more professional and more clear, bring clarity. So it is a little fancy, but the intent there is to try to make it more professional and more clear on the information that we're providing.
Right, and you did a good job with that. And yes, an electronic version would be great, because typically we look at the backup before we come,
Right.
and she still has to provide quite a few copies when we get in here. So if we can be mindful of that, I can do with that, because as soon as I walk out the door, I'm throwing this one in the trash, because I never erased the email from Robin. So I always have it in electronic. So I'll be mindful of that, because that could get a little bit costly. Especially once the seats start to fill up, or we have an issue and people are starting to come back, she's gonna have to provide stacks for folks. It ain't gonna look good if we got colored ones and the rest of them in black and white.
Good point.
Hey, Tom.
I love it. I'm a data guy, okay, and the very first thing I look up and I see right in the mission statement, you're looking for customer service, delivery, safety and those things. These are all the things you should be looking at.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else on this? And I appreciate Carla's comments. I had the same reaction. I see all the toner being used on that page, and my penny pinching hurts me. Okay, are there any issues? Do we need to have printed copies for everyone of everything?
We don't have to have that, and especially now that there is not a lot of public here. Usually when the public comes, they want to have printed copies. If we run into a situation where people do start coming back and I need to make copies, I could make everything in black and white except any charts where you would need to be able to differentiate the colors.
So in terms of the UAV, what do you guys, is everyone comfortable?
It's a wonderful report.
I mean, in terms of not having printed copies for us.
Oh, yeah, I don't have to have a printed copy.
I don't think so. I need one. I can bring a tablet or something like that. Pull it
Yeah, I
up.
can pull it up on my phone if I need to.
Everyone good with that? That'd be great. I would love to not see a bunch of paper.
Okay.
One other suggestion, I'm kind of looking at Dave Worm as I make this suggestion. So the pages separating it where we have a lot of color on the page, there might be a way we can, when we print, like an electronic format, it has all that color, but when we print it, not have all that background.
Yeah,
Is that possible?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I was saying, is to not, and I know how, when those pages are full page color, you can just erase the background.
That's
out.
what I, yeah. Perfect. Okay.
All right, yeah, I think we're ready for Dino.
All right, Dino, if you want to get up and we'll switch to the energy supply section and
All right, good afternoon, Chair and board members. You want me to cover the narrative first? So for Deerhaven Renewable, you may recall previously, we had a D-rate in the unit. We put a new induced fan in, a variable frequency drive on an ID fan, which is the induced draft fan. It's the main fan that goes to the boiler. That particular motor originally was a 5,000 horsepower motor, went to a 2,000 horsepower motor, but it wasn't powerful enough to drive full load capability. So we were derated about 95 megawatts for a significant period of time, about 3 months. We took an outage from June 5th to June 20th, put a new motor in there. It may not be our final motor because the motor lead time was 48 weeks. So we were able to find a used motor. We were able to put that in, and we have had the unit up to 103 megawatts since then, full load capability. That's still not where we want to be because, believe it or not, we did the variable frequency drive from a 500 horsepower to a 2,000 horsepower motor to have a megawatt improvement. So we expect to have a less parasitic load, and we expect to get about a megawatt or two, and we won't be able to do that until we get to the final motor. But we were able to get the full load capability, which is really important to get into the summer months, considering that the Deerhaven Renewable is around $39 a megawatt, and our next cheapest unit, which is combined cycle Kelly, is $76 a megawatt. So it's a huge difference between the two. So to have that full load capability, even though we took an outage, was worthwhile. For Deerhaven 2, the cooling tower has been fully restored with 9 of the 10 cells. You may recall the fire resulted in damage to 2 of the cells. We have 9 of the 10 cells in service. The 10th cell is ready to go. The only thing it doesn't have is the fire suppression system, so we won't put it in service until that is in service. But we don't need 10 cells to operate. 9 is enough to do that. The total cost so far for the recovery of the cell is about $3.2 million. Much of that is driven by supply chain issues. And we're working with our insurance carrier. Our deductible is $500,000, and we'll work to recover our deductible from the carrier of the contractor that resulted in the actual damage itself. On Deerhaven 2, or excuse me, on the, Deerhaven 1, as I mentioned yesterday during the O&M and capital budget discussions, we have an RFP, which is a request for proposals out on the street to do a lifetime assessment on Deerhaven 1. Deerhaven 1 is scheduled to retire this December. That's after 50 years of operation. Believe it or not, 50 years of operation of a power plant is not normal. Okay, not normal at all. FPL doesn't own a single plant that's over 35 years old. JAA doesn't own a single plant that's over 30 years old. And we have 4 of our 8 units are older than 45 years old. So it's obviously at the end of life, but what we're going to be doing is called a lifetime assessment, where you assess the major risk items, which for us is the turbine and the generator, and the steam chest, which is a safety issue. We've done this before for the Kelly plant. As you recall, we got 57 years out of the Kelly plant steam turbine. We just replaced that in 21. So we're confident we're going to get an extension. What we don't know is how long that extension will be. The empirical data will drive that. But our goal is to get 5 years to go to 2027, which allows time for the integrated resource plan to kind of come into place and maybe some other generation replacement. And for the Kelly combined cycle plant, we had a warranty outage in April. So 1 year after you replace the turbine and generator, you work with the original equipment manufacturer called the OEM, which for us is Siemens, to do some basic inspections of the components, because obviously it's covered under warranty. If you find it then you don't have it later on to repair. So we had that warranty outage. We did have some discovery work that we're still going to track, but all the major items passed under the warranty. We've had good success out of Kelly. We've got about 40 megawatts of Unit 8, which is about 2.5 megawatts greater than what we had with the original Unit 8. On the actual metrics on the dashboard, so as the general manager pointed out, while we're shifting it, the gentleman pointed out, we use a certain scale of metrics. We have a strategic plan for energy supply, just like we have a strategic plan for the city. We have a strategic plan for GRU. Energy supply has its own strategic plan, and we track certain metrics on our units. Our base load units, which are units that run routinely all the time, our steam units, which are all running as we speak today. All 5 are running. So you look at Kelly plant, you got CT4 and Unit 8. That's the combined cycle plant, so it's actually 2 separate units. You have Deerhaven 1, which is a steam unit. Deerhaven 2 is a steam unit. Deerhaven 1 is on natural gas. Deerhaven 2 is on natural gas today. And then you have DHR, which is on wood. Those are all base load plants. There are different metrics for tracking base load plants for the NERC standards, which is our regulatory standards, than they are for our peaker units, our combustion turbines. Our combustion turbines, CT1, 2, and 3, are basically jet engines, and they are designed to meet peaks when you have a loss of unit or when you have a significant change in load. They are fast start, fast load capability, higher temperatures, higher pressures, but there's a different set of metrics for tracking those. So the first metric we're looking at is equipment equivalent availability factor. So the next slide, you'll see availability. Availability is just is the unit available to start? And the only time it wouldn't be available to start is when it's either in a planned outage or in a forced outage. We set that up on 18-month outage cycles, as I mentioned yesterday, so we know at the beginning of the year what our availability should be. And then we put some availability for forced outage in there, a small percentage, within the industry average to track our reliability of units. So availability just means you can start the unit. Typically you want 100%. Anytime you're not in a planned outage, you want 100% availability. Equivalent availability factor takes the D rate out of that unit. So if you had a unit that was available, but it's not able, Deerhaven Renewables is a perfect example, where I told you we couldn't go to 103 megawatts. We were at 95 megawatts for almost 4 months. That comes across on your availability, and you'll catch that in your equivalent availability factor. It means the unit is not capable of meeting full load capability, which means it's not 100% reliable to support the load for generation. We track these for all the units. To the far left-hand side, you will see the target numbers for each of the base load units. So you're going to see Deerhaven 2 in blue. We did orange and blue, obviously. For the next one will be combined cycle, Kelly plant in orange. And then you'll see DHR in gray. Wood is gray, so we use gray for wood. But you'll see the targets off on the far left-hand side, and then this is a quarterly report. You'll see the targets for the next 3 months. And when you see something that's got significantly below the metric, that's because the unit was in outage. We had nothing that was abnormal short of the DHR D rate that I had mentioned previously, which existed all the way until June 5th. Actually, it existed until June 20th, almost this entire quarter, until we came out of that planned outage. And I'm happy to report it's up to, again, 100% equivalent availability factor at this time.
I'm sorry, before we leave this one, just because it's a new one, you said, so where are the targets? You said they're to the far left.
The far left-hand side, those are the annual targets. The far left is all the targets for the year.
Got it.
Okay, so you'll see the target. If you look at April, you'll see where we have for, again, Deerhaven 2, 66.74. Well, the target overall for the whole year is 88.41. We try to do for the whole year, because
Sure.
if you do it by month, you're going to have outages, planned outages and all that. So it's whole year. And again, it's designed to measure the health of the generation system.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
The next one's availability. Next slide's availability. Same 3 units, but this is just saying, is our outage plan working and are the units available? This doesn't take into consideration any D rates, so you expect to be 100% outside of your outage here. And you can see we're doing very well, other than the numbers that are not 100% are outside the outage. Tom, oh, the pointer, or do I change the slides too? Okay, thank you. Okay. Let's see if I got a slide. Okay, so you'll see, for example, on Deer Haven 2, for the availability, this was in outage. If you recall, we didn't come out of outage for Deer Haven 2 until the April 13th timeframe following the fire on the cooling tower. But most of the availabilities are going to be at the 100% range unless we were in outage. None of these are a result of anything other than outage. No forced outages in any one of the units.
So the only thing that really defines unavailability is either maintenance or it's out of service.
Correct. You would, Chair and Board Member, yes. So you're either out of service for a planned outage. If you're in a forced outage, you're taken away from availability because that's E4, equivalent forced outage rate, another term that we do track for our units, not on our slides, but we do track that. Typically, the number is less than 3% for most units. And that's when you have outages in between outages, 18-month cycles that aren't planned for. Tube leaks, something unexpected, and of course, you take a detriment if you have one of those outages. It's against your health in your unit. You're hoping that every outage you do in 18 months, that you can run the entire 18 months without having another outage. That's the design.
You know, most of these, because they come from a cold start.
Most of,
The unit itself, what do you call it? It can be available, but it could be, it's not warmed up. What do you call it?
Good question, great question, Chair and Board Member. So availability just means if I press that start button, will it run? That's all it means. It doesn't mean it has to be running, it has to be available to run. So for a base load unit, which are the steam units, that's really important. For a peaker, we track unavailability, which I'm going to get to in a minute. That's a bigger problem. We track that by hours. Hope that answered the question. Okay. The next, this has been asked for several times, generation by fuel type. And again, this is just in percentages. So you'll see from the right coal, and we have biomass in blue and natural gas in green. And you'll see it for all three of the months, April, May, and June. So the only reason you'll see less than 35% for June is because I recall I had DHR in the short duration outage from June 5th to June 20th to replace that motor that I talked about. So that's why you see it lower, but typically we're running around between 35 and 39% on renewable energy. Any questions on that?
Can you just touch on why we burned coal?
Oh, yes. So in the case right here, we see 1% in June. Thank you, General Manager, for reminding me, Board Chair members. We have natural gas, as we all know, is a commodity that's moving very quickly and very erratically. In fact, one of the things that we didn't talk about last night during the fuels budget, there was a lot of questions associated with the fuel adjustment and when will the fuel adjustment come down? Nobody can answer that question because capitalism is working at its best right now. When I mean capitalism, natural gas is going overseas. Okay, China is saying at all cost, we're going to buy it. Germany is saying at all costs we're going to buy it. So if somebody's going to be able to sell natural gas overseas, LNG, they're going to sell it. So the fundamentals of natural gas have changed dramatically. Coal is the same way. We can't find coal. We have a train that is currently loading right now. That train will load tomorrow. We'll have it at the end of the month. It's only 10,000 tons of coal, about 20 days of normal operation. But there's no fundamentals here. So when natural gas is so short and we have a hot spell, they have an alert on the NOM. So we have a nomination of natural gas. If you have an alert day, which means natural gas is being exceeded across the East Coast or even the Midwest for us, there are certain percentages where you cannot go over that. If you do, you have to pay a penalty, which is 3 times the closing cost of that natural gas at the end of the month. So you wrote a blank check. You don't even know what that value is going to be. And I'll give you an example of this. If you recall back in February of 21 through February 17th through 21st, they had the cold spell in Texas. During that cold spell in Texas, we had no natural gas availability. GRU was on 100% of solid and liquid fuels. So we were on wood, coal, and liquid fuel with the exception of South Energy Center, which has no capability other than natural gas. So during that period of time, we paid $198,000 in penalties for exceeding our natural gas limit just for the South Energy Center. But we made $780,000 off of the power that we sold during that period of time. So GRU, because of the diversity of our fuel, be able to burn solid liquid fuel, made money. Back to the general manager's question, why is there 1% there? In June, we have an alert day where we could not use natural gas without threat of a penalty. So we converted Deer Haven 2 to burn partial coal and as much natural gas as we could burn. So we minimized the coal burn as much as possible. Coal will be basically our emergency fuel that we use when we have those alert days. So, does that help?
I have a question and then I guess maybe a comment. So I mean, it's good we're in the summer now. In winter though, where we have natural, people are running the furnaces and stuff. What happens when natural gas is in short supply? We have to deliver it, obviously.
Well, great question, Chair and Board Member. LDC, the limited distribution, that is always covered separately. So all residential and commercial natural gas that are used for appliances and stuff, that's always met. I'm specifically talking about the power natural gas. So we always prioritize LDC first. We've never had a shortfall of LDC. But again, LDC 17,000, power could be 70,000.
Okay.
So that's where the shortfalls come in the power generation world.
Got it. And then and maybe getting out there. I know I was talking to a GRU customer the other day and telling the story of how cheap Deer Haven Renewable is compared to the next thing, and they said, "Oh, I thought that thing was sitting there offline. I thought no one ever used that thing." I think that's the story you're telling of our diversity and how we're able to use Deer Haven Renewables to offset or to minimize some of the fuel adjustment charges. I'm not sure how well that's being told, or maybe it's being told and I didn't hear it and they're not hearing it. But I think it's a great story.
And if desired, I can send the board member a link to a page that we update daily that shows all the cost of what the unit runs. But Chair, board members, I think the best way to answer that question, if you remember the reason for the biomass plant to begin with, was the anticipation that natural gas was going to go to $8 to $10, right? So you're now no longer anticipating that, okay? It's here. And for a different reason, there's still fracking available, but the supply of gas is. So now we're at that point, as I mentioned, $39 for Deer Haven Renewable. The next cheapest is combined cycle, which is really cost effective, $75. Purchase power today ranges anywhere between $150 to $84. So FPL is at 84, CERC's at 150 to 160 for purchase per megawatt. Okay? And we're still making it about 106 at Deer Haven too, pretty expensive, but we're making it at $39 at Deer Haven Renewable. It's the whole basis for the biomass plant. We've been hoping, I'm sure the general manager doesn't appreciate us being in that particular position, but he likes the idea that we have the diversity. I'm sure he would much rather not talk about fuel adjustment.
Maybe I was going to say, I think the newspapers would be interested to hear this story because there's been so much said. Now, again, you guys have to decide whether you want to open that can of worms. So thank you for
Did I
that.
answer your question?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
And the next slide will be unavailability. So I mentioned for the base load units, equivalent availability factor and availability are the most important. These are NERC terms. These are not, we don't make these up. These are what everybody tracks industry-wise and is part of our business plan. On a peaker unit, when you press the button, you want it to start. The only time you're using a combustion turbine is if you've lost another unit or you have a demand that you didn't anticipate. That demand needs to be online within 15 minutes. And that's typically what these combustion turbines do. So we track unavailability. So that means if we're in and outside of a planned outage and that unit's not available, okay, it's not going to meet our peak needs. CT3 is about an 80 megawatt unit. CT1 and 2 are both about 18 megawatt units. Again, it varies between summer and winter. It gets more megawatts in the winter than it does in the summer. But for long story short, we track unavailability on number of hours. The same thing we do with Deer Haven 1. Deer Haven 1, we track unavailability. Deer Haven 1's for regulation of the plant, not necessarily for base load. So unavailability of the hours, and you'll see the hours that we track for each of the individual units. Yes.
Can you stand a 50-minute, what do you call it, startup?
Say again one more time, sir.
Did you say, what do you call it, if you push the button, it could be up to 15 minutes?
So, yeah, the combustion turbines can load in 15 minutes. They'll be online. A steam turbine is 4 to 12 hours away. From the time you start a cold start of a steam unit, cold start's 12 hours away. It's actually 16 hours for dairy-driven renewable. But a combustion turbine can be online within 15 minutes. It actually has to be. By our regulation, our contingencies. For example, today we're operating right now, dairy-driven 2, dairy-driven 1, dairy-driven renewable, and combined cycle. If you lose any one of those plants, and you don't have enough surge volume for the other plants, spinning reserves, to meet the other, you have to start a combustion turbine. CT3 would be our first choice, 80 megawatts. You only have 30 minutes by the NERC standards to replace that entire energy. So you can have the import of energy from other sources for 30 minutes. Within 30 minutes, you have to replace that internal to your own generation.
That was what I was getting at last night, but you have the ability to bring it in from the outside to fill in the gaps, right?
For that first 30 minutes,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay.
And we can fill it in longer than that, but you have to be able to meet your demands within 30 minutes.
Okay.
You have to remove what's called the area control area to a positive number, which means you're over generating.
That was the question I was asking about a spinning reserve, if it was hot and actually running.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, it's Chair of Board members, it's a function of incremental heat rate, as Mr. Walters described last night, and how many megawatts are left on that particular unit. But combustion turbines they're jet engines. They're designed to meet those peaks.
And and you may have said this, and I apologize if you did. This unavailability, is this include planned and unplanned unavailability, or just unplanned unavailability?
This includes unplanned availability.
Only unplanned.
But we track even outages, even our planned outages go unavailable. The unit is unavailable. It cannot start and meet its peak demands. So we stagger those outages. We don't overlap them periods of time. So we track total hours.
So you said this includes both planned and unplanned?
That's correct.
unavailability.
So when we make our targets at the beginning of the year, we take in our planned outages as a built-in number of hours, and then we put what we anticipate would be any forced outage based on historical industry standards, not us making it up.
Okay.
General manager won't let us make up a number.
Really? Thank you.
Does that help on unavailability?
Good job.
Yes, yes, Rich.
I missed
CT3 is 80 megawatts and CT2 and 1 are what?
Okay, they're between 18 and 20 megawatts. Again, 20 megawatts in the winter, denser air, about 18 to 17 megawatts in the summer where we're at right now.
And usually, as you know, the load is going up. You're already ready sometimes when something happens. You know things are going on. Not always.
Chair Barman, can you ask one more time? I'm sorry.
A lot of times you can almost have a predictive when things are going to happen. It's not like you're just sitting there and have to start them up. Sometimes you can see where your load is headed and you can plan adding things.
For normal planned purposes, our base load units would provide that power. It would not be a combustion turbine.
Okay.
When you're starting a combustion turbine, doesn't mean we don't use combustion turbines to provide generation in our planned purpose. We do, but that's very infrequent. Typically, our base load are steam units. For example, I'll picture today, and Mr. Walters covered this last night. When you came in this morning, load was about 150 megawatts. We had Deerhaven 1 at the bottom, Deerhaven 2 at the bottom, Deerhaven Renewable at the bottom, and combined cycle at the bottom. Very inefficient. All 4 units running very inefficiently. Why do we do that? So we can meet that peak load at 1900 that night. Okay, those units are 4 to 12 hours away. You can't make the decision to start those units at lunchtime to meet your needs. So you're running them very inefficiently in the morning, so you have enough of that reserve that we
Right.
talked about, and we can surge, and system control is actually controlling that. But gas turbines are really for the peaking purposes. Any questions on that? The next is the South Energy Center. As you recall, we have 8 generating units for our residential and commercial customers. We have 2 units over at South Energy Center, which provides Shands UF Health. 2 turbines there, so we track unavailability there as well. Our goal each year, outside of our normal planned outage, is 2.5%. I'm happy to report we've been very reliable. They pay us a good price to be reliable over there. We're less than the 2.5%, so we track it by month. Should be the next slide, apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see this one here. Not mine. Apologize. Do you have one for the South Energy Center? Okay, I apologize. The next slide over here, I obviously have a different copy, is our notice of violations. So that would be any of our environmental permit violations. We've had none. And any of our NERC violations, we've had none as well. Obviously, having no violations of any of our permit regulatory requirements are very important, very costly, and gave us a lot of attention we do not desire to have.
Great.
That's kind of it. I know it's the first time. It's a little long-winded. Hopefully, over time, that it won't take as long to go through that. And if there's something you want to see, typically as the general manager, we are tracking things that we already track as part of our business in this quarterly report. Not something unique.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any more questions for Dino? Hey, go ahead, Jason.
So I don't know if this is the correct portion of the report to see it in or not, or if it would be somewhere else, and I don't know how difficult this would be to get, but it's kind of two pieces. One, you've got I'm looking at the generation by fuel type page. You've got this broken down month by month. Since we're doing this quarterly, it would be useful to see kind of a quarterly average if possible, if we could do that. And then secondly, I think what I'm really interested in is a comparison to other utilities in the state. And I don't know how difficult that information is to gather. I wouldn't think it is that difficult. It would be relatively stable over time.
Oh, you'd be very surprised that information
Okay.
is very difficult to
Okay.
get.
Okay.
Nobody releases that information. They do it on an annual basis at the end of the year. They do
Okay.
not do it in the interim year.
Okay.
And we are not an apple comparison to any other utility in the state of Florida for renewable energy. We are not a comparable entity to any other entity in the state of Florida.
What's the nearest
No
one?
other entity has more
1%?
than 30%.
Yeah.
We are typically over 30% renewable. No other utility. There's not a comparison we can make, Chair, Board Member. We can report. I think it's a good idea to have the annual where we're at.
Yeah, I think people need to know that. I think that's a really important detail that, especially a lot of environmental-minded folks that care about that sort of thing forget about in this community is that comparison. So, however we can do it, however often we can do it,
I'll talk to the
whatever
general
way
manager
it's
and figure out
convenient, I think
best
would
way to
be incredibly
capture that.
useful. Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
and Duke is much lower than that.
so that I understand, Dino, like, that we're all on the same page, we're looking at doing the annual average of other utilities renewable compared to our we'll compare it to our quarterly each time. Is that what we're,
General Manager, Chair, my interpretation is our average. We are not going to have a comparison
Okay,
to an
that's what I
FPL
wanted
or
to
Duke in terms of, we have such much higher percentage. And we would not have that information until the end of the year. So if we provided that UAB, we'd be providing you like 21 data right now, not 22 data. And I don't know how relative that would be for you, but we could certainly track ours over the year.
okay?
Does that help, General Manager?
Yep.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And to that point, and I appreciate your comment, Jason, I think for each of us to take a look through this report to say, look at each page basically and say, is this page useful? If it's not useful, we don't want to, waste your time,
Yep.
our time doing that. Is it not useful? Are there changes or other information we would like to hear? Is there a different, like on the availability, the unavailability, I was thinking, I'm most interested to hear the stuff that wasn't planned. Because for us, that's the kind of, you guys plan the outage, we don't really need to hear about that, to break that out. And so stuff like that, I guess the other question I would have is, what's the best way to combine it in a useful way, so we're not just all going, we'd like this, we'd like that, to say, okay, here's our feedback, and then bring it back to you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Mr. Chair. I mean, so I think what we're looking for is, as a group, you all determining what you want changed, and you make a motion on those changes, and we move forward. So if you all, like as you just mentioned, if everybody wants to go home for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks and figure out things, then maybe at the next meeting, you all have a discussion of, okay, we have all these different ideas, what do we want the final product to look like, and then make a motion to that, and then we would love input onto that, because it might be very difficult to provide that information or something like that, but we'd like it to input, but then make that motion so that we move forward with a different report.
Okay, and similar to that, I think maybe is to say, so next time, let's be ready to kind of go through, and someone will make a motion and amend until we get, and then when it goes to GRU, you guys will come back, and as Dino said, no, you can't have that, or that would be difficult, or sure, no problem, or here's an idea, and then we can do a couple iterations and get close to what we want.
Chair and Board, as you mentioned, it's got to be something useful to you, but I did want to just emphasize on something you said. Availability is important, though. If you have an availability number that's in the 80s or 90s, it means you're not prudent in your outage planning and your outage execution. So it's why it's a number that's tracked. It's still available. If I show that number at 75 to the general manager, he's going to wonder why I have a unit down that long and why I'm not staggering my outages so that they're per 2 individual years to be able to do that. So availability is still, it's an industry standard.
Oh, yeah,
It's
I'm
tracked.
not, don't mean to
No,
dispute its
I
value.
didn't say you did. I'm just
Yeah.
letting you know that
Yeah.
all those numbers would mean something to somebody in the power industry.
Definitely, and that's where we're trying to
Percentages.
translate from what you guys are used to showing to what we find most useful for us, so.
Absolutely, Chair.
I'm clearly not saying don't. try.
Absolutely, Chair. I understand completely.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you.
I'd like to see, be able to compare. I mean, how is this normally presented in a, what do you call it, in a utility?
So, good question, Chair and board members. When you start looking at our targets, like I showed them there, our targets are typically how we've done historically with a little bit of fine tuning, i.e. more stringent, not less stringent. They don't give us more latitude. We take away latitude. So typically the leadership team is performance improves, you kind of raise the bar, increase the bar. Can I get to 89%? I was 88% this year, 89. We don't go to 85. We do it based on historical numbers and, of course, making that target something that is worth achieving. And so you have to work to actually achieve it. So it varies for each of the units. If you have 12 units in your fleet, your availability could be completely different. And equivalent. For us, we have 5 generating units. So it would be different for each of the various generating plants, utilities, whether it be FPL or Duke. But those numbers are typically going to be in the 80s or high 80s, 90s for equipment availability factor, because it's measuring the health of the unit. We still would not be able to get those numbers until the end of the year. And that is even hard to get for the privately owned utilities.
Because they're your targets.
Those are our targets, but based on good historical numbers.
Right.
With a little bit of raising the
Right.
bar each time.
Which is reasonable.
It is. It is. And it is a function of how many planned outages. I mean, if we're going to replace a turbine and generator in Kelly Unit 8 like we did in 21, that's an extended 48-day outage. Typically 30 days is our outages. So we have to take that into consideration. So it takes historical, but it also takes what your planned work is to come up with that number.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dino. So I think, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, Mr. Chair, do you want to have this on your August agenda? Because that's August 14th, which that would give you guys time to go through it, look at it, and see if you have any other feedback.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
So I think I'm going to move through, go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to move through some of the graphs and information that are on the water wastewater report. So the first slide there with, it's basically showing flow rates at our Murphy Water Treatment Plant. And then the other pieces of information you see there are essentially the orange line, which is rainfall, because rainfall has a large impact on usage. And then the consumptive use permit, which is the permit from the state water management district for us to withdraw water from the aquifer. What this is really kind of just demonstrating, this is definitely a long-term kind of item, is we have a permit through 2034 to stay under that 30 million gallons per day. And so we're tracking it over years and years as we move forward over the next 10, 12 years to make sure that we're staying under that permitted capacity.
So can you fill us in on the acronyms there?
Oh, sure. So I'll just start at the top. I'll just go through everything. So fiscal year to date, we're just looking at, again, from our fiscal year starts October 1st up through June. MWTP is the Murphy Water Treatment Plant. Consumptive use permit 30 MGD is million gallons per day, which is also the y-axis of the graph on the left, showing that. And I think I hit them all. So So again, this is kind of one of those things, just so everybody understands too, how permits work, they're on annual average daily flow. So you could have a month that exceeds 30 and that you're not exceeding your permit. It's the annual average of that. But those months, if you start getting months that are exceeding it, you're starting to get in the realm of you got to do something about that. And then the other thing with any sort of capacity plant upgrades, it's going to, you can't do it overnight. So you don't wait until the very end and then add that capacity. You have to plan ahead, usually several years. And there's also typically regulatory triggers as you get closer to 80%, 90% of a permitted capacity that you have to do a plan. Then you have to have a design. You have to, get a contractor. So there's regulatory requirements as you reach those.
So MSWRF,
Say it again. I'm sorry.
MSWRF,
MSW.
at the bottom graph, it's the blue bars.
Main Street.
Oh,
water.
sorry. So yeah, so the next one, so let me kind of convert. So the next one is the wastewater treatment plants. So again, fiscal year to date, WRF is water reclamation facilities. We used to call them wastewater treatment plants. Now we call them water reclamation facilities. We've been doing that for like 20 years, so it's not like that's a recent thing. MSWRF is the Main Street Water Reclamation Facility. KWRF is the Kanapaha Water Reclamation Facility. So those are our two wastewater treatment plants. One is out by Veterans Park off of Tower Road, the Kanapaha, and the Main Street is on South Main Street off of Southeast 16th Avenue.
So what are the implications of exceeding the Main Street?
Yeah, so great question. So kind of as I described on the water side, similar on the wastewater side. The annual average daily flow is what your permitted capacity is. So the fact that March and April we exceed that doesn't mean we exceeded a permit, but the Main Street plant is getting closer to its permitted capacity. And so we are currently doing an upgrade to the Main Street plant. And that upgrade is renewing and replacing aging infrastructure, but it's also adding capacity. And so we're adding 2.5 million gallons per day capacity to that plant. That project is going to take probably the next 5 years to implement that. So again, that's why you have to sort of plan ahead. The last part I'll also say about wastewater treatment is you can never take the plant out of service. So you can't shut a valve off and stop the flow from coming. And so you oftentimes, I mentioned some percentages earlier, in wastewater you want to stay pretty much at least at 80% capacity. Once you start getting above that, it's very difficult to do maintenance. It's very difficult to take systems down, unit processes down. And so you typically want to stay around 80% capacity and you don't want to exceed that. We are beyond 80% capacity at the Main Street plant on an annual average daily flow level. So the indicators like this help you over the long term to make sure you're moving in the direction of addressing capacity issues like that. The last thing I will say is our permitted capacity, we have the ability to, between the two plants, to do some transfer of flow. So we have a force main that connects both plants so that we can, if one plant starts to get higher, we can divert the flow to the other plant. One direction, we have more capacity in one direction than we have in the other, but that is some flexibility and capability we have. So I'll keep going. So those are the plants. The next slide talks about our water distribution system. So in our water distribution system, we have almost 1,200 miles of pipe. We have galvanized steel pipe, which is very common, older pipe that was put in all distribution systems back in the day. Those pipes often have leaks or have calcification that reduces the flow capacity of those pipes. And so we are really trying to work through replacing those pipes systematically throughout the system. And so we have goals to try to replace 5 miles of pipe every year. And so what you're seeing here is just kind of seeing how many feet of pipe are we replacing each month that we're working toward that overall goal. So that's that. We also, kind of, these are just stats. They're not comparing to anything, but services replaced. So most of our water leaks occur on services that go from the meter to the house. And so, like, most being like 90% of your leaks are happening at that location. A lot of it has to do with a type of pipe that was put in the 70s and 80s, polybutylene. And so we have a program where we're trying to proactively replace all of those. So we used to kind of wait until they leaked. Sometimes we would repair the leaks. Now what we're doing is if you have a leak on a polybutylene, you replace the service. And then even more proactive than that, going into neighborhoods that are all polybutylene and just replacing all the services. And so what we try to do is replace about 1,000 services a year, trying to march toward that, dealing with those leaks and getting the polybutylene out of the system.
I'm sorry, you said you're replacing the pipes between the service and the house?
Between so between the main and the meter.
Got it.
At the house. Yeah, we don't, beyond the meter is private. So we don't do that.
Okay. And as you're changing out meters, are these AMI compatible meters? Or?
Yeah, so the meters you're seeing here, where we're changed out 6,600 this year, we're putting in smart meters. What we don't have yet, due to supply chain issues, are the ERTs, which are the device that helps communicate. So we will have to go back to the meters and add the ERT, but we are putting in the smart capability meters as part of this change out. And in fact, in the water system, we have about 70,000 residential meters that we're going to replace. We've already done about 12,000 of those with the smart meters. I think you have questions.
So with the meters, a lot of folks always make the comment they've never opened the box to read the meter, but you can open a box today and the rain and the sand will fill it up tomorrow. With the ERCs, will they go all the way to the top of the meter box housing, and people, you won't have to dig it up at all? They'll just run a machine over it.
Yeah, so well done. So when we move to AMI, the ERTs, actually we drill a hole in the lid and then it sits on top of that, so it's able to, one of the challenges with water meters is they're underground, so the ERT actually sits on the lid, so it's actually communicating to the electric meter, and the electric meter is communicating to the grid. One of the challenges is going to be, so we don't even have to go there. When AMI is put in, we won't have to visit at all. And so one of the challenges will be over time, you're not getting down it. Like right now, at least monthly, you're getting into those boxes and you're cleaning up things a little bit. You're actually seeing leaks and things like that. So we won't be going to these very often going forward. And so folks may still be confused, especially going forward, that looks like nobody's been here in a year. Because they're right. No one's been there in a year. And so, that's going to be a continued communication issue, making sure customers understand that. But going back to what the member first said, I do this at my house all the time. I open my box and look at my meter. It can be perfectly clean today. If it rains tonight, it looks like no one's been there in 20 years. And that's very confusing for customers because they think, there's no way you read my meter. It looks like no one's been here. But we live in Florida. We have sand and a lot of groundwater flow, superficial, and it changes rapidly. So,
And I have a part two. It says the linear feet of pipe lined. How does lining happen, and how does that compare to replacement costs?
Yeah, perfect. So on to the next graph. One of the great technologies in the last several decades is lining. So basically what you do is it's called a trenchless technology. So you don't have to go dig up a pipe. So, one option as pipes reach the end of their life is you dig it up and put in a new pipe. Very expensive, especially a lot of sewer pipes are under roadways and sidewalks and things of that nature. Lining is a trenchless technology where you put in a bag that has a resin, you put in really hot water, and it basically creates the plastic pipe inside of the old pipe. And oftentimes it gives you integrity of the pipe, extends the life. It also, Tim will appreciate this, but it'll change the C factor so that it actually is more efficient. And Barry, you guys are both the engineers, but it makes it a more efficient flow in addition to doing that. And so it's a technology we very much invest in millions of dollars a year because, again, you're extending the life of that infrastructure 20, 30, 40, 50 years for a pipe that you'd have to dig up and put in. Cost-wise, man, don't hold me to this. I used to know the answer to this on the tip of my tongue. It's probably a quarter of the cost to doing full dig up, but that's based on a lot of circumstances. If it's in the middle of 39th Avenue, it's a lot more to do the excavation than other locations, but it's probably 10% to 25% of the cost to do the lining versus a full replacement.
I had one other question with that. If there was any lead inside of the piping, would the lining cover over that?
Well, this lining is on sewer pipe.
Okay,
So I think the lead, typically, we're looking at the drinking water system.
Right.
So none of our we don't have any lead pipe in our system, in our water system.
okay.
There are, and we don't have any known. We don't know of locations where we might have lead fittings, but there are. We find them periodically, so we don't know specifically where they are. But those are like fittings and elbows and things like that have some lead in them, but not the pipe. Not a full pipe. And so, and again, that's on the water system. So we don't do really hardly. We've done a little bit, but we really don't do lining of the water mains.
Even the big mains?
Yeah, even the big mains. So what happens is wastewater mains, much more aggressive atmosphere. You have hydrogen sulfide, that gas starts to deteriorate the pipe. And most of these pipes that you're doing a lot of the lining on are iron pipes. And so they're iron pipes, hydrogen sulfide is just eating them away over 30, 40, 50 years. You have places that might be a little bit of a high spot, so gas bubble sits there continuously and just is eating and deteriorating that pipe. We can come in there and line it with a plastic lining and problem solved. And some of these pipes, I will just say, I've got some wicked pictures where you go in and it's like, not cottage cheese, Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese on the top of the pipe where the metal just went to nothing. And we could still come in and be able to line those pipes. So that is that next graph that's shown on the top there is that lining. Again, on the lining side, we try to, or this is actually cleaned and inspected. Sorry about that. I guess the next one, it talks about lining. So clean and inspected is this top line. We try to clean and inspect about 75 miles of pipe a year. And what that clean and inspected means is we just have trucks that go around continuously in the system. They clean the line by jetting it. And then they come back with a CCTV kind of little robot. And the robot marches down there, takes video of the line to basically assess the condition of the line. And so, we try to do 75 miles a year so that we have an understanding of the condition. It's a condition assessment, so then that drives then our capital budget and what our improvements need to be. And so that's what that metric is. Linear feet inspected and then linear feet of pipeline that the member was talking about. So the lining is just, again, another metric of we're trying to positively impact as much pipe as possible and improve it and extend the life. And then I'm going to jump to this is with lift stations. So I think you all know. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So you're talking about 75 miles of pipe a year, sewer pipe?
Correct.
How many miles of sewer pipe does GRU manage? I don't think people have a concept of that.
Yeah, so we have 650 miles of gravity main and about, I guess, closer, a little more, probably 675 miles of gravity main and 150 miles of force main. And the difference is gravity flow and the force main is a pressurized pipe.
So like after the pump stations, the lift
Correct.
stations that push it out.
You got it. which is a great segue. So the next metric really is these lift stations. So we have 175 or so lift stations that are functioning, which as gravity mains run downhill, when they get too deep, you have a lift station or a pump station, pumps that wastewater back up into a force main. That force main may go all the way to the plant or may go to another gravity system that it flows to. Those pump stations, lift stations, are very critical to our operation. If you lose power, if you get a high wet well, which is alarms of kind of what you're getting close to overflowing wastewater. And so what this is tracking is what is the cause of callouts. So those stations all have what's called SCADA. We have operators that 24/7, they're at home and they get a little call on their phone that says, hey, lift station 12, you need to go out and check it out. It's got this issue. They're able to look at that, see that on their phone or device, and then go out. What this is measuring is what are those call-outs typically about? So long run time being the predominant one in this list basically means most of the time it's what we call pumps get ragged up. So wastewater, there's a lot of stuff in wastewater. The rags are kind of when things start to get together, and there's literally rags, which are mostly unflushables, wipes and things like that. They collect a lot of other stuff, and then they slow the pumps down. And so you have a long run time because they're all jamming up the pump. And so we have to go out there, pull the pumps, clean the pumps, and then put them back in there. So when you start to see a lot of long run times or at a specific station, we may start thinking of, do we need to do something else to remove these rags? Do we need to pull these pumps more often? What do we need to do to avoid that kind of alarm? Similarly, all of these things you see, these are cumulative for all the stations, but we also have metrics that show most frequent stations, like lift station 1. We're going there all the time for whatever issue. And so that, again, it's a lead indicator for us to then go do something about it prior to it getting worse. Yes.
I was just wondering, how many lift stations do we have in this system?
It's about 175 currently functioning lift stations.
Okay, thank you.
So you had 175 and you had 460 callouts for this period.
Correct.
That means either somewhere we're getting a whole bunch, or on average, each of them we're getting 2 or 3 or something.
Well, so this is year to date, so it's 9 months over a 9-month period. But
Right.
yes, that is precisely. Yeah, I mean
That's all.
it's often. I might say every night. I might not be right about that, but just about all the time something's happening. A good example is the comm failure. So that's a communication failure. So that could be nothing's wrong,
Right.
but you lost communication with it. There's some utilities that wait till the next day to address that. We don't, because the communication failure could then you could lose a pump 10 minutes later, and you have no idea that that's happening. So just about all of these on here, it's going to be we're out there. At least one employee is out there figuring out what that is, potentially calling in an ice tech, an electrician to also assist. So it's a 24/7 type of challenge.
So I know these are critical. When one goes out, what happens upstream from that? I mean, are there homes that suddenly things are backing up, or what happens?
So if you look at this list, the donut, the pump failure, what happens is there's always at least 2 pumps.
Okay.
So that means another pump's kicking in. But there are also times you need both pumps. So if that's the case, then when only one pump's running, you could start to get a high wet well. So if you get a pump failure and then 30 minutes later get a high wet well, man, you got to have somebody there with a pumper truck. So they're fixing the pump, but they're also pumping out wastewater and hauling it somewhere else to avoid an overflow.
So if you had an actual outage, you'd probably take out both your pumps.
So if there's a power outage, we have a lot of stations that have generators.
Okay.
So we have a lot of stations that have generators. It's typically the larger stations that accept flow from other stations. It might not be like just the station that's in Blues Creek doesn't have a generator, but the station downstream of that accepts Blues Creek and Turkey Creek and all that it does. And so, so basically a generator will automatically kick in, but typically we can get somebody to the station under the time that has allowable storage. So if you get an alarm, you can get somebody there prior to that alarm leading to an overflow.
But if you have a major outage, that's a challenge for you guys.
Very big challenge. So some of the hurricanes, we have a third or a half of our stations that lose power. That becomes a very major issue, and we have generators at stations, we have generators on trailers, and we have pumps on trailers, all of which can be utilized, like a diesel pump, all of which can be utilized to help keep things going. And then we have both sludge trucks as well as tankers that can come, pump out, and physically move the water through a truck to a different location, which is extremely inefficient, but absolutely used when there's a massive outage of power in order to keep functioning.
Thank you. Was there?
On your donut here,
Mhm.
I see all the listed things, but how many power outages were there?
So I'm not sure if that's the yellow or not. It may be, or it may be that there's very few and it's not on the primary callouts. So I'm assuming that it's probably the yellow.
Yeah.
So it's probably, somewhere around 50, 40 or 50 power outage.
After Hurricane Andrew, all the lift stations went down.
No, it is power.
What do you call it? And the power was out for a long time, and then after about 3 or 4 days, all the fuel ran out. What do you call it? And then it really became a problem.
That's a problem.
Yep.
Okay.
So I will just speak to that briefly. We have fuel storage, both broadly as the city of Gainesville, but also at our plants. And then we also have emergency contracts with, one of the two primary vendors, I can't remember which one we currently have the contract with, but we have a set aside that they have specifically for us as a utility. And we can call on that when an emergency is coming and saying, hey, we need 40,000 gallons of diesel fuel available. They'll reserve that for us. And then if we don't use it, we may have to pay some premium for it, but if it's available for us to have. So that is part of our operations is to have that. But if an event went on for weeks and weeks and weeks without power, that would be more challenging. I will say I can't remember now which storm, one of the storms we contacted FEMA and they were able to bring a tanker of diesel as part of our emergency response so that we had more available. So that there's also those routes and that we have in those contacts. And so, so the 460 lift station callouts. And then, this is just a big indication of how many gallons of water were delivered in that quarter, how many gallons were beneficially reused in that quarter, which the beneficial reuse is all of the water that returns to a wastewater treatment plant is beneficially reused. The reason it's less than the water delivered is mostly irrigation. So people are irrigating, it's not returning to our system. And then, again, these are just sampling how many different water quality samples we perform in order to operate and meet regulatory requirements at the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plants, or the water reclamation facilities. And then the last one is SSOs. So this is one a lot of people are familiar with, but sanitary sewer overflows. So our main goal in wastewater is to collect that wastewater, get it to the plant without it coming out of the pipe. It came out of the pipe for some reason. And so this really kind of indicates the reason why. And if you look at it, most of it is because of grease or blockages due to customers putting non-flushables down their toilet or in their system, or putting grease into the system. And so it's a very, very difficult element to deal with. And so we do a massive education and try to let people know not to do that, because once they do that, it's nearly impossible for us to keep up with cleaning the system and getting those things out as quickly as they're possibly be put in. So, but we do that. We clean our system and we try to educate the customers on that. And another big part is third-party damage. So third parties, which basically contractors, they're doing construction out in the system, and they just hit a pipe, they hit a force main, they hit a gravity main, and we have overflows. So those are the two typical drivers. The other last big one is infrastructure, and that's just really, where our infrastructure reaches that failure point before we're able to line it, or before we're able to do that. And so that's really a balance of trying to extend the life of the facilities as long as possible to reduce costs, but balancing that with, if you run all the way to failure, you could have a overflow, which we do not want to have.
So this chart shows the quantity of SSOs, not the volume of the SSOs.
Correct. And typically that's what regulatory agencies are actually more focused on, the quantity. That when you do have a big event, then quantity becomes a big factor. But response time, the amount that it happens starts to become a bigger issue. But in general, we typically track number of SSOs. And then, just to kind of touch on, so this is just talking about outreach, particularly 200 specific customers received information about SSOs. So if we have an area, we see an extensive amount of grease or an extensive amount of the wipes, we will go specifically put door hangers on those doors, or do robocalls, or do something to educate that area. So what this 200, I don't know specifically, what it probably means is there was an apartment complex or a subdivision where we had a backup, or we had a significant amount of those things, so we hit that subdivision with that information this quarter. And I think that's really it. So again, I think if you all can take time to review that more, do you want different information in a different format or comparison, at the next meeting we can address that. And feel free to do that with the other sections. I just wanted to do a deep dive on these two tonight. But the other sections, you can look at them. They're still work in progress, so we're going to bring something different next time. But if you have thoughts and ideas, we look forward to hearing that from you all as well.
Okay, any questions? Any questions on things that weren't covered?
In the safety section, this big pie chart at the end, it says safety observations through June 30th. What exactly is that? What's a safety observation?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question. So safety observations are essentially employees looking at something that's going on, like they're not involved in the project, for instance. We're digging a trench, and an engineer comes up. That engineer looks at the operation of what's happening, does a safety observation, fills out a form of what they saw, like, were people wearing hard hats? Were they wearing vests because they were near the road? Did they have a spotter for the truck that was backing up? They do that safety observation. They submit that safety observation through a system we call GNV-SPAN. And so the idea of a safety observation is, one, you're obviously looking at an operation which you could have an opinion on or input, but you're also, the bigger thing is probably you are becoming more aware of operations and what's going on. And so that self-awareness and what we call situational awareness is raised, so that as they're doing other work that day or in the next week, their situational awareness is better through those observations. And so we have some different goals in different areas of how many of those we're expecting employees to perform, with the ultimate goal of improving that situational awareness and improving the safety culture overall.
Thank you. I just got to say, this is a huge step in the right direction. I had a dickens of a time extracting pertinent information out of those old, what looked to me to be just printouts from industrial software that maybe the operator understood. But anyway, this is a lot more succinct. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, in going to the safety operations one, this would be one that honestly doesn't mean a lot to me.
Okay.
Because I don't have a reference point to say, well, energy supply, I assume it has a lot more people. And so is this a good number, is it a bad number? And I also know as someone who's very involved in safety, you know, as we're emphasizing more safety, you're gonna get more safety operations. So I don't wanna, you know,
Yeah.
it's some way for us to judge, is this good, is this bad, is it getting better, is it getting worse?
We
Anything like
appreciate that. Yeah,
you
so
can
we'll
provide.
try to I keep saying contextualize as we talk about it. So contextualize that a little bit more. I will tell you, I mean, I'll give a shout out to Dino. His area, energy supply, is much more mature in doing the safety observations. They're really the leader. That's primarily why they're doing so much more than the other areas. Energy delivery and water wastewater, it's been a more recent thing over the last year and a half, 18 months. And so they're kind of catching up in those other areas in performing them. But energy supply is not necessarily because they have more people, because they have less people than energy delivery, but they're more mature in the program and require more, frankly. They require more per month from the employees to perform. And we've just seen tremendous benefit from that, which is one of the reasons why we're expanding it through more areas of the utility.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? before we move
Yeah,
on?
I had a question. So, Dino, were you gonna say something? You need to piggyback on there?
Yeah, Chair, Board Member, there was a question asked about the number. Again, it goes back to what the general manager said, situational awareness. So your number's gonna be based on your trend, what you're doing. If your trend is you're going in the wrong direction, you're certainly gonna have more safety observations because it's there to create, not just situational awareness for the people being observed, but for the person doing the safety observation. So there's not gonna be an industry number they're gonna track. It's creating the behavior that we want to generate. You know, for example, in energy supply, we have one recordable injury. There's 13 corporate recordables, one. We have corporate goals. We're not doing energy supply goals. But if our trend was 5 of those 13, we certainly would be doing more. So the number is based on the behaviors, not on necessarily a number. If your trend is going in the wrong direction, you're going to be doing more of those to create that situational awareness for your work group.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And I just had a question about, so if you say had the situational awareness or they do one of these reports and they say, hey, I observed a couple of guys didn't have on hard hats, there was no spotter. What do you do with that information? What's the process for correcting it? And how is it, kind of determined if we got better at that or if that was the situation? And then what about the employee? What type of education or
Right.
whatever is given to an employee?
So I'll hit a couple pieces of that, member. So one, we have a no compromise safety plan, and part of what that means is any employee can say, "Hey, you guys need to put a hard hat on. You're doing unsafe work. Stop. Let's address this." So we encourage folks, if you're in a situation like that where there looks like an unsafe condition is happening, that they can step in and make comments and talk to the folks there. Two is to ask, so what happens to all of these in this Gen Suite software is they're all entered electronically. Our safety and training area, they get all of them, they review all of them. They may go back to that employee if they want more information, or they take that data to start to realize nobody's wearing hard hats anymore. Let's put in a training program to where, so they're utilizing the data to determine what areas they need to step into a little bit more and do a better job of training.
Thank you, that's.
And Mr. Morris may want to touch on any of this. Okay.
No, I think that captured exactly what, if we were just capturing the number, that's one thing. If it's being used in a way that we're creating some best practices and some other things, training and stuff, that's great.
That's it.
So, Mr.
Again,
Chair.
not to interrupt, Chair Board Member, I do want to say that it depends on the nature of the violation. If I'm doing a safety observation on a system that's supposed to be depressurized, and the individual did not depressurize the system before the maintenance stopped, I stopped them right there. They're done, okay? We do a stand down, we try to find out, because we prevented a safety event for occurrence. If it's safety glasses or PPE, one dot doesn't make a trend. 2, 3 make a trend, we may address it. So it does depend on the the item that's observed during the observation determines the corrective action. If it's severe enough that somebody could have got hurt and the action by the observer stopped it, that requires a plan of action milestone to resolve.
Absolutely.
And it could be systemic into other areas, it could be other people, so we treat those, we work through safety and training to do that, but it's really the severity that determines the corrective actions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John, you had something?
Is this something we're gonna talk about? What do you call it in terms of input or,
So at the next meeting, if, in the April meeting, we'll come in and be prepared to suggestions, comments, questions, and so hopefully someone will make a motion of changes we'd like to see. Unfortunately, we can't, outside of these meetings, can't discuss or email back and forth, but,
at the next meeting?
at the next meeting, we'll do
Okay.
that. If that works for everybody?
That sounds good. I got some definite input on the customer side.
Okay, great. All right, anything else on this before we move on? All right, thank you. Our next and last item is the UAB work plan. Honestly, I didn't expect this other item to take so long. I think it was great and greatly appreciated. I had all kinds of, we're gonna have plenty of time. I thought we'd go introduce ourselves and talk about kind of our area of interest, but for the sake of time, we're not gonna do that. So, and just one comment, we're all volunteers here. We all have, I had an all-day meeting today before I came to this meeting. So I feel at times, we each have our own pet topics and things we find fascinating, like safety incidents and things like that. I think all of us should feel free to say, at some point to say, have we talked about this enough, or is this something that can be taken offline, just to respect everyone's time? Because sometimes it is just one person, and sometimes someone can ask the question, and it should be a generous question, and then someone could say, no, I want to hear that too, or not. So in terms of how far we want to go into stuff. I think most of us were at the meeting yesterday, but for those who weren't, one of the commissioners asked us to look into the possibility of extending the water and wastewater into urbanized areas, so basically outside of GRU territory, city boundaries.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I can clarify, the commission gave direction, I think it was 2.5 years ago, for GRU to bring back essentially utility boundaries that if utilities are extended beyond those boundaries with a specific focus on water and wastewater, if they're extended beyond those boundaries, that the city commission would need to approve that. So right now, our service area goes well beyond the city limits and, out to 241. And so basically what they were looking for was, okay, if we can draw these boundaries to where if it goes past 241, for instance, that can't just happen at a staff level, that you provide that service, that would need to come back to the city commission for their approval prior to that. So what happens now is there's an urban services line that Alachua County has established an ordinance. We cannot extend utilities beyond that urban services line. But up to that line, anything that we do can be extended, and we provide the service. And again, that's all just at a staff level. So I think what commission is looking for is to reprioritize this. And when I had talked to some commissioners, what I had told them is like, so we need to get that on your all's agenda to come to you prior to going to the commission. And so I think what they were asking was to prioritize that to come to the UAB.
Okay. So I think next step would be for you to, because really, we can have lots of ideas, but we definitely need to hear from you guys to say,
Yep.
We'd love to do that from a GRU point of view, or we don't have the water to give, or based on population density, this would be a fantastic thing, terrible thing, or here would be the cost to do this thing. So I think nothing for us to do, from what I'm hearing. Next, it's in your guys' ball.
Yeah, so I think what we could do is if we want to schedule that on the August meeting, we can bring what that would look like, ordinance language, what those boundary maps would look like, and the pros and cons of doing this.
Okay, you'd be ready by August to do that?
When is the August meeting?
14th.
I thought it said the ninth.
So potentially, yes. Potentially, yes. I'd have to just, we did a lot of work on this and it was just kind of tabled, so just kind of pulling all that back out. I did talk to the city attorney this week because they have some element in that, but I think that is doable in August 14th. So if we want to put that on the work plan to bring that back August 14th, that would make sense. And Mr. Chair, if I just add, Robin and I were having this discussion this afternoon. If the way we want to do this is Robin can capture what the priorities are of the UAB and kind of fill out the work plan, and then essentially the UAB, you all as a body can vote that, make a motion that this is our priorities and the things that are in this charter, what, you know, kind of the dates and times and all of that is what we want to perform. That might be the easiest way to kind of move forward, kind of move us forward. So just a suggestion.
All right, thank you for that. So the next thing that the mayor asked about was the solar.
I had a comment on
I'm sorry,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah. For one.
And I'm not doing my job here,
I'm
so.
sorry. The agenda says that the next meeting is August 9th. That's not correct?
14th is a Sunday.
Okay. So, yeah, I was going, okay, so that was one. And just for clarification, Tony, Commissioner Hayes Santos was not, his comments, I don't think were about whether we should extend or not extend. His comments were about should that go through staff or should that decision come directly to the commission? Come to the commission, am I correct?
Correct.
So it wasn't the boundaries and all of that was in question, it was the fact that staff made the determination whether we extended or not, and the commission wants that power back with them, right?
Yeah, so the power hasn't been.
Never been with them, but they want it with
They
them.
want to have a step in the process where they're able to approve or deny the extension.
Okay, and then the process would be then, if it came to that, the ordinance or whatever would be then, if it came to a question about expansion or whatever, then the process will come to us. The staff will bring the process to us. We'll make a recommendation to the commission whether they should or shouldn't, and they'll vote between themselves whether to extend or not, and staff won't make that decision. That's correct?
So I believe that is the direction from the commission. I see Tim smiling. You know, I think the challenge is timing on these things as you go through this process. Adding this as another layer for the development is probably going to be challenging. So that'll be probably some of the comments that I will bring forward in terms of pros and cons of moving in this direction.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate what you said, because I didn't get that. So currently, it doesn't go, it's just a staff decision, even outside of city boundaries. So this is a change in policy to say it needs to go through some other body? And so it wasn't, should we do this or not? It was.
It was that.
Okay, thank you.
Staff has been approving these expansions, and the city commission wants them to bring it to them for them to approve or deny the expansion.
So what is our role, your understanding of our role in this?
My understanding of our role in this is
Or what they're asking for us to, the city commission.
what they're asking for us to do is to prioritize staff bringing it to us that they want this particular change to happen with the pros and cons, and for us to recommend to them whether we should change and have them create an ordinance to say the city commission is going to make the decision, or whether we think based on Tony's presentation that that should remain in staff hands, and that process could possibly hinder him from, timely development or whatever he's going to present to us to say, hey, here's the pros and cons. This is why I don't want to, and this is why we've had it forever go through staff. So the commission wants to hear from us for us to say that. What that's going to create from that is if the city commission decides that, hey, that has to come to us, then we will be hearing about that first and making a recommendation whether we expand it or whether we don't expand it based on the information that staff is going to be saying when they're asking the commission for permission to expand.
Got it.
And you're
Thank
probably,
you for that clarification.
You're probably talking about sitting through presentations about development plans and utility master plans. You need that information to be able to make a judgment call like that. And I don't know that I'm interested in that. I can tell you.
And I also know that community engagement is a part of everything. So when we start talking about an expansion and going into different places, that's going to be a key. So when you're doing this process of they want that transition, make sure that they understand that it may take a while to create a process for you to be able to do that, considering we have gotten really big on community engagement. It's mandatory. So if we are going to run up against neighbors like in Archer, and we want to do expansion, then the process has to happen long time before that expansion needs to be done, right, in order for us to capture over that. So that's some of the things that you need to we consider when we're going forward. There's a culture of engaged communities with people like NAACP, environmental justice, and other groups. So there's a lot of awareness going on, and we need to include that in that process.
Great, thank you. That's a very different request than I interpreted, so very much appreciate that and that clarification. So the second thing that the mayor asked about was the solar limits. I know we had a presentation on it. I guess I hadn't thought that there was additional, but I guess next step is probably going to be to make a board recommendation from the UAB, because we didn't do that.
Yeah, so as we were having that discussion, probably when we brought that item, it would have been better to have a recommendation at the end that you all support or change or whatever. But what I was planning on doing was basically writing up a memo, summarizing it and summarizing where we are and what our path forward is, and then bringing that to the UAB if you guys are okay. So I could do it one of two ways: either run it by the chair. If the chair is okay that it reflects what we talked about, then just go to the city commission. Or the other way could be that we bring it back at the August meeting. You guys look at the memo. If you all are good with that memo, then we will move it forward to the city commission with a recommendation. So, yeah. So
what is so if it's brought to me, just what I heard I was comfortable with and was a little, based on what the mayor was saying, I think he didn't understand in the same way I didn't understand quite the policy. It felt like it was a very hard fast. We hit 2 megs, you're done. There was more flexibility in what I heard, so I would be comfortable reviewing, if it's my understanding, passing it through. But if you guys are more comfortable hearing it yourselves,
I think I would be more comfortable hearing it myself.
okay. I'm in no way offended. It was just if you guys didn't want to hear it again, I'd be happy to not have you guys hear it again.
No.
Okay.
So then I think what Robin's going to do is just put that on the August meeting, that we will bring that memo back for your all's review, and then if you approve that, then we'll take that to the city commission.
And I have to apologize. I got the date of the next meeting, the August meeting wrong. It's actually August 11th. My apologies.
Okay.
Not even the 9th? That's okay.
Robin, you're amazing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I don't know how amazing I am when I keep dates straight, but thank you, Carla.
So the last thing that we heard last night that they want to make sure we're prioritizing is the IRP, which I appreciate that they want to hear our input on, and I'm excited to be doing that. And as I said last night, with all modesty, we are here to serve the city commission in what they want to hear and not to tell them if they don't want our opinion on something. I don't really feel a need to give them my opinion on something. Is there anything else anyone wants to add at this point?
I just want to say I appreciate this work plan because it lets me know to eat me a little snack coming up to our August meeting. It seemed like it just got thick. So.
Yes.
So, I also heard some interest last night from the commission in more of a deep dive on the electric vehicle situation.
Yes.
So I'd like to see that input into the work plan. And then we had in our last meeting, and I'll just read the motion. This is directly from our minutes. Member Foltz made a motion, seconded by Member Crow, to have staff give an update on the number of home visits audits GRU does per year, and discuss whether GRU and the city can partner to give energy scores to rental homes. The motion passed unanimously. So that seemed to me like something that should go into the work plan since we talked about it, voted on it. So those are two things. And then I was actually going to suggest that we go through this document and take a few things out. I think we're in a position to do that tonight. And then just quickly related to those two things that I just mentioned, the communication between us between meetings is tricky, right? Because like we can't talk to each other. So I had two items on here that I sent information to Robin to share with the group, and I didn't know if that made it out.
I did.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So yeah, so I wasn't included on the message, so I just wanted to make sure that it actually got, or maybe I was included at my GRU email, which I never checked. So, but I just wanted to make sure folks got the communications that I had sent out about electric vehicle data, and the other one was the article talking about the city of Gainesville's use of home energy score, because those are both going to be relevant to conversations that are on our work plan.
When did we get that?
So we're allowed to, what do you call it, to give something to Robin to send to everybody?
Yes,
You just can't send it directly to
and
him.
we can't respond to it.
You can't respond. I did send that earlier this week, I think, or maybe it was late last week. I have a distribution list with all of your personal addresses. So it should be in your email. There were, it might have been.
I didn't get it. So if it was, I just wasn't included because I've been looking out.
You should have gotten it, so if you
I'm
didn't get
saying,
it.
you sent it to her, right?
I sent two items to her to share with you all.
To her to share with us.
I will
Right.
double check.
But you were saying that you didn't get it when she shared it out?
Correct.
Oh, I wouldn't have sent it to you if you sent it to me.
Well,
I mean,
that's
that, I was about to say,
what I was asking.
I probably
I
wouldn't
think
have
you
sent
did
it
know.
back to you. I would have sent it to all the other members.
But I
And
think-
I've submitted stuff to her that she sent to other members, and yeah, it didn't come back to me because I'm the one who gave it to her.
Sure.
Well,
But if nobody else has.
But I
received
mean,
then-
it's possible
Is
that.
it anyone else received? My memory's shot right at this moment.
I do
wanna
remember
say-
seeing an email that she said some, that was from Jason Folks.
Okay,
I do remember
so
that.
maybe. John says
All
he
right,
doesn't.
so, yeah,
We may want to resend it just to be safe, Robin.
because that was
tell you
details
what.
directly related to things that are going to be in our work plan that we're.
Robin, my email is probably less than yours.
So, anyway, that was it. So I do think that we could probably, I mean, I have a few suggestions. I'm sure other folks do as well, of things that we could take out of this work plan probably, since we're adding stuff to it.
So, Mr. Chair, can I follow up on just a couple things members shared? So, the home energy scores, I think from what you said there and what's in the minutes, it's pretty clear the scope of what we need to do. EVs, so what I think we would look for is more direction from you all, like what are you looking for? What do you anticipate? What are questions you're looking to have answered? Those types of things. We need to, obviously EVs can be a million things, like kind of hone in on what specifically you're looking for. So that's another thing to do, like during a meeting like this, is for you all to kind of hash out what are you looking for specifically, what's the scope that we're to deliver, and then I would like to weigh in on what that effort would be,
Sure.
so that you all understand what that effort is and how long it might take us to be able to provide that information. So,
Okay. And what I heard Jason say was, at first he had the specific request that we voted on, that, we need to get, or staff will provide a response, but the EVs, just to make sure we get that in there, and then we'll clarify it, hopefully during the workshop, exactly what we're looking for. I think that's a good idea. If you have suggestions of things to take off, we can vote real quick and decide whether to take them off.
Okay, so I'm just going to start from the top. So the issue of GM selection, it sounded like there was opposition to that, and I don't know that any movement has happened on that. And so unless anybody feels strongly the other way, to me, we should just take that off.
I'm sorry, which one was it?
The very first one about GM selection, I know you'll support taking that off.
Oh,
Carl.
absolutely.
So on that one, just real quick, so I'm going to be meeting with the mayor. I talked to him last night just to get just general input, and this was one I was going to bring up again on the if you don't want our input on it, just tell me. But if you guys don't want me to bring it up, it doesn't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I said leave it alone.
Okay.
LIG it, boo. Just LIG it.
Is that the general consensus, or?
Yes.
Okay. I cannot do that.
I feel the other way, but I think I'm in the strong minority on that, so I'll let that one go. The second one was the Second item, actually, this has been listed as a member crow. We'll bring back specific requests for the board to consider since March. And I feel like if that hasn't happened by now, then we should probably just remove that here from this work plan. Because it was very nebulous to begin with, and it wasn't the sort of like, kind of getting into specifics that we are trying to do with this work plan.
Any discussion, objection?
What was this, which one was this?
Second item, addressing large budget questions, UAB
Okay,
wants
yeah,
more
okay.
input, that item. Folks okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with taking that off, because to me, I don't know if, because I'm looking across here and I'm becoming one of the senior members, ain't it? That's interesting. But yeah, it seems that we do discuss some of the big
Right.
and the risk in depth, and we have people from the community that come and help us lead those discussions. So yeah, I say we can take that one off.
And then a little further down, lowering bills, that one even has a question, should it be removed? Because this is obviously an ongoing priority, something that we always talk about rather than a specific conversation that we're going to have.
Right. I think more than lowering bills, look how different rate pressures are affecting communities and what we can do to kind of solve that. Lowering bills is out of our wheelhouse because the city commission makes a determination on the budget. I'll say that again for the public. So, I mean, yeah. So there's that. Lowering bills is not. Work is not about lowering bills. That's not the key. It is how do we operate efficiently where it's not problematic to people who cannot afford or who are already distressed with utilities now. Not about lowering their bill. It's about getting them in a place where they can be able to have conservation and other things happening so that when we need to operate as a business, they're not affected by it. I think that's the broader question. So, yeah.
So just for clarity there, we've been doing a lot of work in this space recently. And we could give the board just an update on essentially all the resources that are out there for individuals. It's both within GRU, but also other agencies we partner with that come alongside that can help provide assistance to individual customers, whether directly paying for the bill or doing improvements on their homes that lower their bill. So we could do that fairly easily if that's something that you all request. I think so I've done that with commissioners, like individually, because when they get calls, and I don't know if you guys have constituencies like the commissioners, but they get calls from a lot of things, and it's able to put things in their hands so that they understand all the resources, phone numbers, programs, where to find information for customers that kind of have an acute issue with their utility bill. So if that's something you all would like to do, I think that's something we can do pretty easily.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see that. And I know I heard different people in my community was talking about something that you guys just did recently, where they all were able to get, I don't know if it was assistant with the actual bill or come and do some things around the house. So that was buzzing in the community. It wasn't a bad discussion. You know, that was appreciated, and more stuff like that. So
well, and just to give you all a teaser, I mean, I think what you're referring to, member, is the Central Florida Community Action Agency. Is an agency that got federal funding, and it's just for directly helping people with their bills. And so we partnered with them where they set up shop at GRU for a couple of days, took people's applications. They took over 300 applications, and they have $900,000 of federal money just to help people pay their bills. In addition to that, we got federal money, ARPA money, for expanding the LEAP program. The LEAP program is Low Income Energy Efficiency Program. We got an additional $1.9 million to spend over the next several years, and so we've expanded that program. We're doing a lot more homes and a lot more improvement. And so we've really been trying to get the word out to folks that are fit into that low income category, makes them eligible, that this is a program that can really reduce their individual bill. We're not lowering rates, but you're reducing their bill by doing improvements like replacing an air conditioner, or ductwork or something like that. And so windows. So again, that's just a teaser of some of the things we can kind of give an update on what all of those resources are. And again, there's a lot of other partnering agencies that we work with that also help do that.
Great, thank you.
I have a suggestion. Can that be on the back of the bills, like on the last page? You guys usually have a blank half a page on the back of the bills. You could put in if you need assistance on there
So
or somewhere.
yeah, so we do bill inserts, like kind of rotate different ideas, and so we
Right, but the bill itself, a lot of times people just toss the flyer,
got it.
and on the bill itself, they'll keep.
So-
Or at least, I'm sorry, at least they will read almost every line on there.
On the bill,
On
but the
the
flyers,
Actual bill.
they're
The
usually.
flyers usually go in the trash.
Yeah, we recently, I want to say 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we did a reevaluation of our bill and kind of did all that. So we kind of just recently did that. But, you know, I'd have to take a look at what all that would entail to add that to the bill.
But however you can get it out, I think it's just important to have.
It would be a lot less ink than the flyers.
Gotcha.
All right,
So it sounds like we're replacing the nebulous sort of lowering bills item with something much more specific, like what Carla was talking about.
well, I would say what I've heard was, because these are our items to discuss, but we're replacing it with a GRU presentation rather than, so that would be removed from the list and not replaced. Is that a correct interpretation, Jason? Okay.
Okay. On the second page, this third item, role of UAB, again, this is sort of a nebulous, like philosophical question that I think different people have different opinions about. I don't see that as like a work item per se, then that could be pretty easily taken off the list, I think.
I think it can be taken off the list since there exists an ordinance.
And a referendum that says the role of the UAB. No matter how much we want to do some more or, you know, have some grand ideas, it is very specific in what our role is. And so I don't think that's something we need a whole presentation for.
Moving down, attending APPA, this is something that, you know, could be brought up sort of annually at an appropriate time. It doesn't need to be an ongoing item. Obviously, we need to make that decision, you know, several months out from the next conference, but that doesn't need to be on here on an ongoing basis. So those were a handful of things that jumped out to me. I thought if we're adding stuff to the list, it's a good opportunity to take some stuff off to sort of simplify this a little bit. And then the last one for me is just, you know, well, this is UAB energy policy next steps. I think that's a big question for another time, but we need to talk about that at some point. What's going to happen with that?
And just to finish, so there's a UAB identifying priorities.
Yeah.
Is there a reason to keep that one? Any reason to keep that one?
That's what this is, right?
Right.
That's what we're doing.
And then the other one that I saw was community solar. I'm not sure if that's something we've talked about or have an interest in getting into at this point. I always have to talk about solar, but I don't. Is that, anyone see a need to keep that one?
Community solar. Not, if we're, to me, and this is just for me, if it's not a projection or something we can do right away, then let's try to get this new stuff, like Jason said, as much as we can get accomplished throughout the rest of this year. And have some better conversations. And then we can always come back and say, okay, now it's time to talk about solar as we're moving forward, talking about renewables, or make it a part of another conversation, combined with something.
I am suggesting remove it, so I am totally with you. So,
Are we saying remove on the community solar?
yes.
Yeah, we're gonna remove that for now, and we have an option to bring it back at any other time. But like Jason said, as he's adding different things and electric vehicles and what the commission wants us to prioritize, let's prioritize those items, and then we can always come back and revise this list. That way it doesn't get so crowded with everything we wanna see, and you're trying to figure out where to place these things and on what agenda. Let's focus on what we have priority for, which is what we're doing, prioritizing, right? We can add the rest of that stuff back. We can talk about it later.
So just to be clear, we're talking about removing GM selection, addressing large budget questions, lowering bills, community solar, role of UAB, attending APPA, UAB identifying priorities. And then adding electric vehicles, water, wastewater, urbanized area, whatever that was, and solar limits, which is going to be coming up the next one.
And, right.
Was there anything we missed?
No, I wanted to
Say, I don't think this is one that I'm suggesting be pulled off. I was wondering, have we did the ethics sunshine law training to orient new members, refresher for others? Have we started that process? And then it has all the new members did that wonderful tour that I went on. Have they done that part already?
The legal orientation will be at your July 26th workshop next week.
Okay. All right.
But actually, maybe we should be pulling that one off. Not that it's not going to happen, but it's not a
But I mean,
policy
if-
thing or something we need to discuss. It's just,
And if it's already planned for July 26th, then we don't need it on the work
all right,
plan.
let's pull that one off too, if that's okay with everyone.
So just for clarity, we're gonna do it.
Yes.
We're just not gonna have it on the work.
It's not on
Right,
the
we
work
don't
plan.
need, yeah,
Yes.
we don't need it on the work plan if she's already got it scheduled
right.
for our workshop this week.
I like simplifying, so thank you, Jason. That's-
And just to reiterate your list of stuff that's being added on, also we had the motion that was made at the last meeting about the home visits and home energy score.
She has it.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Great.
So I assume you can, the home visits question, that can go in with the home energy scores. That's kind of one item.
Thank you.
All right, and just, which reminded me, so we had made the motion and I was getting updates on the variability of marginal cost of electricity, to feed into the electric vehicle. I've gotten some information back from Jamie. Honestly, wasn't as useful as, and I've talked with Jamie, and asked for different things, but at some point, I'm not sure, we can take this offline, but to discuss at some point, am I asking for too much? Just, we're trying to capture what can be captured by shifting time, so just to let you give, that's just a real quick update. It wasn't what I asked for, trying to be very specific, didn't give the information that I thought it would. I was maybe not as clever as I thought. Thank you, that's a better description. Anything else on this topic? We all good?
I did just want to point out the environmental justice. Jason had talked about inviting a group to come and speak about that. And they would like to come to your 9/27 meeting. That'll be a workshop, but that's the date that works best for them, so.
Is that good for everybody? All right, that sounds great. And thank you for making that happen, because I know we've been putting that off, and that's important.
Stuff going on
Yeah.
that is resourceful.
As well.
Good.
Some good stuff going on.
All right, anything, hold on, let me check my agenda. Any member comments? Hearing none. Citizen comment? Hearing none. Next meeting, July 26th, workshop on the 11th. I'm sorry, workshop on the 26th, regular meeting on the
On the
11th.
11th, yes.
Thank you, and with that, we are adjourned.
All right.